Hi, I'm Peter Paddon and this is the Crooked Path video podcast, and this time I'm going to talk a little bit about pendulums, like this little beauty here. This is my personal pendulum, and I'm very particular about pendulums, what pendulums I use, because it's a common fallacy that you have to have a gift to use a pendulum, and it's not true. Everybody can use pendulums. It's just that you have to find the right one to work with, and that doesn't mean you have to search endlessly for the perfect pendulum. No, not far from it. But you do have to have the right type of pendulum that suits your nature. And there are basically three different types of pendulum. There is metal ones like this, made of silver. It can be any metal. You don't have to be fussy about how expensive or rare it is. There's the wooden pendulums. You can find many fine designs in beautiful crafted wooden pendulums online and in metaphysical stores, and there is the ones that are made from crystals or rocks, so basically mineral pendulums. And this is one of the items that I really do recommend that you don't buy on the internet, at least first time round, because you do need to actually get some hands-on experience with them in order to figure out which is the right type of pendulum for you. Because people have an affinity. I have an affinity for metal ones, especially if there's a crystal attached to the metal somewhere. But some people work better with wooden ones, some people work better with just a crystal on a thread. And you need to experiment, you need to try them out and see what works for you. And what I'm basically going to do in this podcast is give you the basics of how to get them to move, so that you can then maybe go into your local metaphysical store and try out the pendulums they have there and see which type of pendulum you have an affinity for. And once you know that, you can go and get your pendulums from anywhere, although I recommend buying one from the store so that you don't upset them. So how exactly does the pendulum move? I mean, there's lots of mystique attached to the pendulum because it seemingly moves by itself. Well, actually it doesn't. The pendulum is actually moved by microscopic muscle twitches in your arm, in your hand. And so it actually moves pretty much the same way as when you deliberately swing it like that. The difference being that you're not using voluntary muscles and you're not using your own volition to make them move. The idea is that your subconscious acts as a conduit for whoever or whatever is giving you the answers you require. And it is your subconscious that makes your muscles twitch and makes the pendulum move. Having given you the physical explanation of the mechanics of how it works, that doesn't make it any less weird when you're doing it. It feels, actually, when you're using a pendulum, it feels as if something has grabbed hold of the pendulum and is actually moving it for you. It feels as if the chain or the thread that it's hanging on has become rigid and that it's being manipulated by something hanging onto it. It's a very strange feeling, and you never really get used to it, but it's part of the way that you know that it's not your conscious self that is involved in moving it. So, having got a pendulum to try, or having your favourite pendulum, having already sorted out all that other stuff, what exactly do you do? Well, there's a couple of simple basic tricks to making this work effectively. And the first thing is make sure that your pendulum can swing freely. Some people use a pendant hanging on a chain and they'll put it around their neck when they're done. Now this was originally set up as a pendant. Well, actually, most originally it was a Victorian hat pin, but somebody took the point off of it and soldered a ring onto it so it could become a pendant instead. And when I first got it, I used to wear it around my neck, and I'd take it off and I'd hold it by the chain, and you'd essentially have a double chain there like that, which does work, but it does give a tendency to make it easier for the pendulum to swing that way and harder for it to swing that way. So what I eventually started doing was taking the chain off and putting the clasp through the ring there so that it could hang from a single length of chain, and eventually I just stopped using it as a pendant. Can't even speak English today. Stopped using it as a pendant and just went with a single length of chain, and I keep it in a little pouch in my pocket when I'm taking it around, and this gives it the most freedom. And so first thing you do is gather your thread or your chain. Some people prefer hanging them from a red silk thread. Embroidery silk will do for some people. Prefer a chain. Some people could care less what it's hanging from. You can, I mean, at a pinch, if you're good at this, you can use a Lego brick hanging from a piece of fishing line. Although you probably want something a little heavier than a Lego brick. But anyway, gather up the thread or the chain or whatever into the palm of your hand, and you want to hold the end nearest the pendulum between your thumb and forefinger, and just pull the pendulum out until you feel you've got about the right length. Normally about 8 inches will do the trick. Getting that length right is fairly important because you want it long enough that it can swing freely, but not so long that it's going to take a lot of effort to make it swing. And about 8 inches, 8-10 inches is about right. The next thing you want to do is to have your elbow firmly planted. Ideally you'll be sitting at a table and you can put your elbow on the table like that. If you find you have to do it standing up, well, you can either lean against a wall, or if there's nothing to lean on, you're in the middle of a field and there's not even a tree nearby, then clamp your elbow in really close to your body, because the idea is to give your arm as stable a base as possible. So obviously sitting at a table is the best option. Let it just hang loose. Pardon me. And the trick here is basically, you've only got so many ways that a pendulum can move, and so you need to take advantage of them. And you just start off always, before you start asking any questions, by just asking it to